page 76. The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living, by Jeff Volek and Stephen Phinney. An expert guide to making the life-saving benefits of carbohydrate restriction sustainable and enjoyable. Section 2. Perspective. Chapter 3. The Modern History of Carbohydrate Restriction. 3.4. Robert C. Atkins, A Revolution Built Upon Historical Rock. In the early 1960s, Dr. Robert C. Atkins, a cardiologist trained at Cornell Medical College and practicing in New York City, put himself on a low-carbohydrate diet and easily lost weight that he previously had struggled to lose. Recommending this diet to others, he observed that they too were successful at losing. Soon he had built a sizable clinical practice in which he refined the use of dietary carbohydrate restriction as a therapeutic tool. In retrospect, Dr. Atkins' timing could have been better. The 1970s was probably not the best time to be extolling the virtues of very low carbohydrate diets. That's because the mainstream nutrition consensus led by Dr. Frederick Stare at Harvard and Dr. Theodore Van Itallie at Columbia increasingly portrayed low-carbohydrate diets as dangerously high in fat. To do so, they needed to ignore considerable contemporary work by Dr. John Yudkin of Queen's College in London and Dr. Charlotte Young at Cornell, whose research possibly influenced Dr. Atkins, who was trained at Cornell. These and other respected scientists had demonstrated safe and rapid weight loss with reduced hunger by prescribing low-carbohydrate diets unrestricted in fat. But like Dr. Handler, these scientifically credible voices were no match for Drs. Stare and Van Itallie. They too were steamrolled or ignored. Given this hostile academic climate, being in private practice was clearly an asset for Dr. Atkins. Unlike university faculty who need to get grants funded and papers published, Atkins was not dependent upon consensus committees, the peer review system used by the NIH, for research grants or on journal editors who decided which papers to accept or reject. As a result, he was less inhibited than his academic contemporaries and thus less prone to being steamrolled. And, although Dr. Atkins was branded a heretic and quack by his contemporary medical peers, his books nonetheless reached millions. In 1972, he published Dr. Atkins' Diet Revolution, 17. See the book, Atkins, R.C., Dr. Atkins' Diet Revolution. 1972, New York, David McKay Company. In it, he leveraged his decade of clinical experience with the low-carbohydrate diet, a valuable clinical experience that many of his critics had none of. Atkins asserted that one could lose weight on his diet without hunger, that blood lipids and especially triglycerides improved despite an appropriate fat intake, and that balanced diets did not work because they failed to deal with the underlying disturbance in carbohydrate metabolism commonly seen in obese individuals. This book sold 500,000 copies in its first 6 months, and the reaction was as dramatic as it was predictable. Harvard's Fred Stare wrote, "Any book that recommends unlimited amounts of meat, butter, and eggs, as this does, in my opinion is dangerous." The author who makes the suggestion is guilty of malpractice. Columbia's Ted Van Itallie denounced the Atkins diet in an editorial in JAMA in 1973-18, declaring it full of gross inaccuracies. See the article A Critique of Low-Carbohydrate Ketogenic Weight Reduction Regimens. A review of Dr. Atkins' Diet Revolution. JAMA, 1973. 224-10, p. 1415-9. In response, testifying before Senator McGovern's Select Committee, Dr. Atkins countered with, It is incredible that in 20th century America a conscientious physician should have his hard-won professional reputation placed on the line for daring to suggest that an obesity victim might achieve some relief by cutting out sugars and starches. With that exchange, the battle lines were drawn, and the polemics played out over the next 3 decades until Dr. Atkins' death from a head injury caused by a fall. In that period, Dr. Atkins sold tens of millions of copies of his books, while his critics steadfastly defended the superiority of dietary carbohydrate over fat. In the meantime, serious scientists interested in the objective evaluation of carbohydrate-restricted diets found the NIH and other granting agencies hostile to their research applications. As a result, little meaningful research was done to address the important questions about the safety and efficacy of carbohydrate restriction, and that which was done we got shunted into obscurity. For examples of this, see Chapter 12. TB writes, "The detractors witness the favorable results, and even so, because they have a hurt ego, they persist in censoring others. This not only happens in medicine, it also happens in every workplace where envy and jealousy corrode understanding. The old saying never loses its validity, what is convenient always prevails." Page 80. Article taken from the net. https://www.maoclinic.org/healthy-lifestyle/weight-loss/in-depth/atkins-diet/R20484885. Atkins Diet. What's behind the claims? By Mayo Clinic staff. What is the Atkins diet? The Atkins diet is a popular low-carbohydrate eating plan developed in the 1960s by heart specialist, cardiologist, Robert C. Atkins. The Atkins diet restricts carbs, carbohydrates, while focusing on protein and fats. The Atkins diet has several phases for weight loss and maintenance. It starts out with a very low-carbohydrate eating plan. The Atkins diet is formally called the Atkins nutritional approach. It has been detailed in many books and is credited with starting the low-carb diet trend. What is the purpose of the Atkins diet? The purpose of the Atkins diet is to change your eating habits to help you lose weight and keep it off. The Atkins diet also says it's a healthy lifelong approach to eating. It says it's a healthy approach whether you want to lose weight, boost your energy or improve health problems, such as high blood pressure or metabolic syndrome. Why might you follow the Atkins diet? You might choose to follow the Atkins diet because you enjoy the types and amounts of food featured in the diet. Want a diet that restricts certain carbs to help you lose weight. Carbohydrates are not demonized, they are not eliminated from the diet, only those that trigger glucose levels. Want to change your overall eating habits? Have medical concerns you think the diet can help improve? Like the related Atkins diet products, such as cookbooks, shakes and bars. Check with your healthcare provider before starting any weight loss diet, especially if you have any health conditions, such as diabetes. What does the Atkins diet involve? The main dietary focus of the Atkins diet is eating the right balance of carbohydrates, protein, and fats for optimal weight loss and health. The Atkins diet notes that obesity and related health problems, such as type 2 diabetes and heart disease, are the fault of the typical low-fat, high-carb American diet. The Atkins diet says that you don't need to avoid fatty cuts of meat or trim off excess fat. Rather, controlling carbs is what's important. The Atkins diet holds that eating too many carbs, especially sugar, white flour and other refined carbs, leads to many issues. The Atkins diet says that it leads to blood sugar imbalances, weight gain and heart problems. To that end, The Atkins diet limits carbs. The Atkins diet encourages eating more protein and fat. But the Atkins diet says it's not a high-protein diet. Like many diet plans, the Atkins diet keeps changing. It now encourages eating more high-fiber vegetables and has included changes to meet vegetarian and vegan needs. It also addresses health problems that may come up when first starting a low-carb diet. Carbohydrates. The Atkins diet doesn't require calorie counting or portion control. You do need to track your carbs, though. It uses a system called net carbs. Net carbs is the total carbohydrate content of an item minus its fiber content. For example, a half cup, 4 ounces, of raw broccoli has 2.3 grams of total carbs and 1.3 grams of fiber. This puts its net carb value at 1 gram. What does the fiber contained in a food full of carbohydrates do? The Atkins diet says its approach to carbs will burn off your body's fat stores, control your blood sugar and help you achieve optimal health. And the Atkins diet says it won't leave you feeling hungry or deprived. Once you're at your goal weight, the Atkins diet also explains it will help you find your personal carbohydrate balance. The personal carbohydrate balance is the number of grams of net carbs you can eat each day without gaining or losing weight. Exercise. The Atkins diet claims exercise isn't needed for weight loss. But it states that exercise can help keep your weight steady and offer other health benefits. What are the phases of the Atkins diet? The Atkins diet has 4 phases. Depending on your weight loss goals, you can start at any of the first 3 phases. Phase 1. Induction. In this strict phase, you cut out almost all carbohydrates from your diet. You eat just 20 grams of net carbs a day, mainly from vegetables. Instead of getting about half of your daily calories from carbohydrates, as recommended by most nutrition guidelines, you get only about 10%. Foundation vegetables, such as asparagus, broccoli, celery, cucumber, green beans and peppers, should account for 12 to 15 grams of your daily net carbs. In this phase, you eat protein, such as fish and shellfish, poultry, meat, eggs, and cheese, at every meal. You don't need to limit oils and fats. But you can't have most fruits, sugary baked goods, breads, pastas, grains, nuts or alcohol. You drink at least 8 glasses of water a day. You stay in this phase for at least 2 weeks, depending on your weight loss. Phase 2. Balancing. In this phase, you keep eating a minimum of 12 to 15 grams of net carbs as foundation vegetables. You also keep avoiding foods with added sugar. You can slowly add back in some carbs that are high in nutrients, such as more vegetables and berries, nuts, and seeds, as you keep losing weight. You stay in this phase until you're about 10 pounds, 4.5 kilograms, from your goal weight. Phase 3. Pre-maintenance. In this phase, you slowly keep increasing the range of foods you can eat, including fruits, starchy vegetables and whole grains. You can add about 10 grams of carbs to your diet each week. But you must cut back if your weight loss stops. You stay in this phase until you reach your goal weight. Phase 4. Lifetime maintenance. You move into this phase when you reach your goal weight. Then you keep on with this way of eating for life. A typical day's menu on the Atkins diet. Here's a look at what you might eat during a typical day on phase 1 of the Atkins diet. Breakfast. Egg-filled avocado with prosciutto. Acceptable drinks include coffee, tea, water, diet soda and herbal tea. Lunch: baby kale and blue cheese salad with hazelnut dressing, along with an allowable drink. Dinner: salmon and steamed artichoke with homemade lemon mayonnaise, along with an allowable drink. Snacks: you typically can have 2 snacks a day. Snacks may include an Atkins diet product, such as a chocolate shake or granola bar. Or you can have a simple snack such as celery and cheddar cheese. What are the results of the Atkins diet? Weight loss. The Atkins diet says that you can lose a large amount of weight in the first 2 weeks of Phase 1A, but it also states that those aren't typical results. The Atkins diet also notes that you may lose water weight at first. It says that you'll keep losing weight in phases 2 and 3 as long as you don't eat more carbs than your body can tolerate. Most people can lose weight on almost any diet plan that restricts calories, at least in the short term. Over the long term, though, studies show that low-carb diets like the Atkins diet are no more effective for weight loss than our standard weight loss diets. And studies find that most people regain the weight they lost no matter which diet plan they used. Because carbs usually provide over half of calories consumed, the main reason for weight loss on the Atkins diet is lower overall calorie intake from eating less carbs. Any organism that reduces the consumption of carbohydrates has to resort to consuming the accumulated fats. Some studies suggest that there are other reasons for weight loss with the Atkins diet. You may shed pounds because your food choices are limited. And you eat less since the extra protein and fat keep you feeling full longer. Both of these effects also contribute to lower overall calorie intake. Health benefits. The Atkins diet says that its eating plan can prevent or improve serious health conditions, such as metabolic syndrome, diabetes, high blood pressure and heart disease. In fact, almost any diet that helps you shed excess weight can reduce or even reverse risk factors for heart disease and diabetes. And most weight loss diets, not just low-carb diets, may improve blood cholesterol or blood sugar levels, at least temporarily. One study showed that people who followed the Atkins diet had improved triglycerides, suggesting better heart health. But there have been no major studies to show whether such benefits hold up for the long term or increase how long you live. Some health experts believe that eating a large amount of fat and protein from animal sources, as allowed on the Atkins diet, can increase your risk of heart disease or some cancers. Why do they say that the excessive consumption of fats and proteins can promote the appearance of cancer? But it's not known what risks, if any, the Atkins diet may pose over the long term because most of the studies about it have lasted for 2 years or less. What are the risks of the Atkins diet? The Atkins diet says that cutting carbs extremely in the early phase of the program can cause some side effects, including a sense headache, a sense dizziness, a sense weakness, a sense fatigue, a sense constipation. Some very low-carb diets also restrict carbs so much that they cause you not to have enough nutrients or fiber. This can cause such health problems as constipation, diarrhea and nausea. Eating carbs that are high fiber, whole grain and high in nutrients can improve the health profile of programs like the Atkins diet, though. It's also possible that restricting carbohydrates to less than 20 grams a day at the level recommended for Phase 1 of the diet can result in ketosis. Ketosis occurs when you don't have enough carbohydrates that are broken down into sugar, glucose, for energy, so your body breaks down stored fat. This causes ketones to build up in your body. Side effects from ketosis can include nausea, headache, mental fatigue and bad breath. Ketosis is another biological process that requires a separate, thorough approach. In addition, the Atkins diet isn't a good idea for everyone. For example, the Atkins diet recommends that you talk to your healthcare provider before starting the diet if you take diuretics, insulin or oral diabetes medications. Also, people with severe kidney disease shouldn't follow the diet. And the weight loss phases of the diet aren't a good fit for women who are pregnant or breastfeeding. No one should self-medicate or self-recommend a nutrition plan without medical supervision. The methods are not guilty, those who carry out the actions are responsible. A conversation about the Atkins diet. June 5, 2004, 1:03 a.m. UTC, source, Dateline NBC. By Edie Magnus. With low-carb diets all the rage, it was big news last month when a once obscure Florida businessman filed a lawsuit against the estate of Dr. Robert Atkins, claiming the late doctor's popular diet nearly killed him. He says the high-protein, high-fat, weight loss plan caused his heart disease. The lawsuit has once again turned up the heat on the Atkins diet, putting the long-simmering controversy back on the front burner. How healthy and how safe is it? Jody Gorin, 53, has been saturating the airwaves, railing about how the diet espoused by the late Dr. Robert Atkins nearly cost him his life. Jody Gorin is playing David to the Goliath empire of books and products bearing the Atkins name. Jody Gorin says, "From my perspective, Dr. Atkins was a liar. I may have been a fool, but I believed him. I believed that the diet wasn't a danger to me." His lawsuit, for personal injury and negligence, is one the Atkins people are not taking lightly. And the fight, in the court of public opinion anyway, could be quite unsettling to the millions of Americans who've opted for Atkins to help them lose weight and stay healthy. Jody Gorin says, "The worst thing I ever did was going on the Atkins diet." As angry as he sounds now, Gorin says he was equally passionate about the diet when he first started it 3 years ago, signing up for the Atkins strategy of limiting carbohydrates in favor of increased amounts of protein and fat. Edie Magnus says, "Why did you pick Atkins?" Jody Gorin says, "Middle age spread. I started to gain about a pound a month. I didn't want to get fat." As many have attested, Gorin found the diet quite appealing. Jody Gorin says, "It's pretty seductive when you're told you can eat cheesecake and all of the steak and all of the bacon." Edie Magnus says, "I read that you ate cheesecake and pastrami?" Jody Gorin says, "Cheesecake, yeah, every 3 days." Cheesecake on the Atkins diet? He says it worked. TB says, "But, what amount of cheese or meat is convenient to eat? It's about trying, not getting stuck in the guts with what is allowed to eat, because a human being is not a pig, a human being is aware of what he is doing and knows if it is something right or wrong. If the doctor tells me that I can eat ice cream, it does not mean that I am going to devour 5 liters of ice cream in one sitting. I would have to suffer serious levels of cretinism." Jody Gorin says, "I put on muscle. I lost fat. Within 2 or 3 months I was down the 10 pounds that I was looking for, and I kept telling people, this is really something, all the way up until the point that I was diagnosed with heart disease." Gorin admits that there was a big warning sign. Within 2 months of starting on the diet, Gorin says his cholesterol, which had always stayed comfortably in the safe zone, around 150, suddenly jumped dangerously high, to around 230. But Gorin did not go to see his doctors. He says he was using a 1999 edition of Atkins' best-selling book, The New Diet Revolution, which cautioned some dieters might notice a spike in their cholesterol. Atkins estimated the number at less than 1 in 3, and advised if a spike happened they should cut back on high-fat foods and try low-fat ones. Jody Gorin says. But then he says, if you're not happy, he uses the word happy, on the diet, don't bother with it. Go back on the regular Atkins diet, you enjoy it more. So, on the one hand he raises a red flag, and on the other he minimizes it. E.D. Magnus says. Doesn't common sense enter in here at all in terms of what you ought to be doing if you see your cholesterol shoot up? Jody Gorin says. If a cardiologist with 30 years of experience and 25,000 patients says just keep checking your cholesterol and checking your cholesterol, they never tell you that maybe, after seeing your cholesterol is staying up, maybe you should get off the diet. They never say that. So, although Gorin says his cholesterol stayed relatively high, he simply stayed on Atkins for 2 more years, until one day when Gorin was on vacation in the Big Apple. Jody Gorin says. I was at a very famous deli in Manhattan having a mile-high pastrami sandwich, without the bread and a big slice of New York-style cheesecake. And that might have been the straw that broke this camel's heart. Gorin says he suddenly felt sharp pains in his chest. This time he did go to a cardiologist, and tests showed he had a 99% blockage in one of the main arteries from his heart. He immediately underwent a procedure to open up the clogged artery. His doctor told him if the blockage had gone unchecked, he might have died of a heart attack. Jody Gorin says. He said get off the diet. Gorin's cardiologist confirms he warned him to get off Atkins, but he told Dateline he's not positive the diet was to blame. There is some heart disease in Gorin's family. His sister had a heart attack at age 59. But Gorin says he's so certain because, as fate would have it, just months before going on the diet he had a heart scan and got a very good report. The results showed a score of 0, meaning very little risk. Jody Gorin says. In the next 2 to 5 years, I had a 95% probability of never getting heart disease. E.D. Magnus says. And then you went on Atkins. Jody Gorin says. And then I went on Atkins. Jody Gorin's accusations against the late Dr. Robert Atkins and his company come ironically at a time when the Atkins diet is finally getting some respect from the medical community. Numerous scientific studies are showing that after a year, low-carb dieters lose slightly more weight than people on low-fat diets, and that on average, their risk of heart disease actually decreases. Longer-term studies are currently underway. Nevertheless, Jody Gorin is suing, demanding the Atkins books and products post clear warnings that, as he puts it, for some people the Atkins diet can be hazardous to your health. E.D. Magnus says. You're asking for $15,000. Jody Gorin says. Less than $15,000. Because it's not an issue of money. I don't need the money. I'm only in it for the publicity. And he's certainly been getting a hefty portion of that. But the Atkins people say it's more like a publicity stunt, one that will leave the courts as clogged as poor Jody Gorin's arteries. Dr. Stuart Drager says. Oh, this is a frivolous lawsuit if there ever was one. This is an individual who is doing this for all the wrong reasons. Atkins medical director Dr. Stuart Drager says as proof, you need look no further than the folks paying the bills. It turns out that Gorin's case has been championed, and is being paid for, by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, an activist group that promotes a vegan diet with no meat, fish or dairy. An avowed Atkins enemy, they are the same people who leaked Dr. Atkins' medical records after his death and suggested he died from his own diet, a claim his doctors disputed. Veronica Atkins says, "I will not let anybody denigrate my body." And in an interview with Dateline, Robert Atkins' widow, Veronica, said the smear campaign shows the committee will go to any lengths to disparage her late husband and push its own agenda. Miss Atkins says, "These things are lies. They are like the Taliban. They're the vegetarian Taliban. I mean, I shouldn't insult vegetarians, but they are like the Taliban, these people. They're nasty." For his part, Jody Gorin is unapologetic about enlisting the so-called vegan activists to take up his cause. He says he went to them. Jody Gorin says, "They've been successful in generating the publicity that I could never have done on my own. People claim it's an animal rights group. I don't know that, and what does that mean to me?" Edie Magnus says, "They'd like us all to stop eating meat." Jody Gorin says, "I like animals, but I don't see that as having any influence or anything to do with the issue of whether or not Atkins oversold the safety of his diet. But the Atkins people claim it has everything to do with what we are to believe about Jody Gorin, including whether he can be trusted at all." Dr. Draeger says, "Who knows how well Mr. Gorin was following Atkins? Who knows if he was able to control his carbohydrates?" Edie Magnus says, "He says he was following it religiously." But Dr. Draeger says while cheesecake is technically allowed on the Atkins plan, nowhere is it suggested it be a staple. Dr. Draeger says, "You know, I've read Atkins. I've practiced Atkins for 4 years. And I don't know how you can do it and eat cheesecake 3 or 4 times a week, even exercising as much as I do." Edie Magnus says, "Is it your position that the Atkins diet is never, under any circumstances harmful to people?" Dr. Draeger says, "Oh no, I think what we're seeing is that there's no nutritional approach that's going to work for everyone." Edie Magnus says, "Can it be dangerous for some people?" Dr. Draeger says, "I think we're now learning that any nutritional approach can be counterproductive for some people." Edie Magnus says, "You don't like that word, dangerous." Dr. Draeger says, "You know, I think the challenge with a dangerous is, when we make claims based on anecdotes. I think when we look at scientific studies, the approach is one that has been deemed safe for people to go through." Interestingly, the language Gorin found offensive, the "if you're not happy don't bother" phrase that he says steered him back to the high-fat road, has been taken out of the most recent edition of Dr. Atkins' book. But Dr. Draeger says Gorin took those lines out of context and is using them to misrepresent Dr. Atkins' advice. And he says, while the new wording is different, the message of the diet has always been the same. Dr. Draeger says, "You need to be responsible. You need to talk to your physicians. You need to take their advice. And you need to try to make changes." He says it's very clear that one of the goals for anyone on the diet should be to keep cholesterol levels down. If a dieter is unsuccessful in making that happen, the book Gorin was using says clearly, then you are fat sensitive and should follow the fat-restricted variation of the diet. Dr. Draeger says, "This is someone who clearly chose not to understand, chose to ignore the message that Dr. Atkins was giving. And now in looking back, at least in my mind, is looking for a scapegoat. Jody Gorin says, "If you can come up with a better reason as to why I developed heart disease, please let me know. Because I haven't found one yet." Jody Gorin is making his medical records available to anyone who wants a look, though most legal experts say his chances of success against Atkins in court are slim. Needless to say, he's off the Atkins bandwagon for now. He's still counting carbs but says he has reduced the amount of saturated fat food he eats. Jody Gorin says, "I'm kind of paranoid about the food I eat." Edie Magnus says, "No more pastrami and cheesecake." Jody Gorin says, "No more pastrami, no more cheesecake. Not, at least, at this point in time." Jody Gorin filed his lawsuit May 26. Lawyers for the Atkins estate have 2 more weeks to respond. Doctors with the Atkins company recommend that, if you're following the Atkins plan, you should be sure to check your cholesterol 6 weeks after starting the diet, and if the levels are higher than normal, continue testing at 3-month intervals. And of course, before starting Atkins or any diet, you should consult your doctor. By Edie Magnus.